All right, so I've pulled all the the guides and the chain off and the pump off. That was pretty messy. There's actually quite a bit of fluid in there, and I had a pan and everything set up, but there was no way to prevent some of it from getting down that oil pan, so I will have to make sure to flush that out. But yeah, everything came off pretty easy. I would say when you're taking these off, be very careful to hold this tool down because it tends to want to try to kick up on you a little bit, get crooked when you're really torquing on those T55 plus bolts. And you really do not want that tool to let go because you could send the valves into the pistons if you get the chain off already. So yeah, just be careful with that because those bolts are really tight. So I made sure I really lay everything out nice here so I know exactly where everything goes back. And as you can see, the pump was rubbing inside of the block. This is so locked up that I can't even turn it by hand. I guess a symptom of this thing failing was every now and then I'd go to start the car and it would seem like the battery was dead because the engine would really strain to turn over. Now I know why. You know, you can see this is cocked right now. That bearing binds up so bad that, you know, the starter has a hard time overcoming the resistance of that pump. I mean, I can't turn this right now. There it goes. It binds up. I mean, it's awful. So, and one other bad thing that I'm gonna have to live with is, I don't know if you can see it or not, but oops, you can see all in here that you know, it's been wearing, it's been chewing into the block a little bit. I don't think that's really going to affect my flow that much, but you know, it's definitely been chewing away at the aluminum, so not good. One other thing I wanted to mention was I lied to you about the chain marks. So this is the original chain, and so there's your darker crankshaft timing marks, and here's your back head mark. And it turns out that they did mark the other side as well. I just couldn't see it with the lighting. So it's there, and all the marks were lined up, and they also line up with the new chain, so everything's good. I hung these two chains side by side, and they were the exact same length, so really didn't have any chain wear issues here, which is good, I guess. All right, so got all the new hardware on here. This was pretty tedious. The one thing I'll say is pay attention. Really make sure that you check every single bolt, because if you miss one or forget to tighten one when you're loosely fitting everything, you're gonna be one sorry guy. So, well, most of these 8mm get torqued to 89 inch-pounds. I will say when I was torquing up the water pump, there's a certain order that you torque them in, and the one on the far end over here, I could never quite get to that 89, and it started to just keep turning on me, and I was pretty sure it was going to strip out, so I had to go by feel with that one. I don't think it ever would have made it to 89 inch-pounds. You could just tell by feel, so you got to use a little common sense. Another thing is my Haynes my Haynes said torque these to 18 foot-pounds. That just doesn't make sense. These would never make it to that. So, I stuck with the, 89 to 100 inch-pounds that everything else got for the VCT actuator housings. And you got to make sure you do these kind of evenly. So tighten this one, the middle one, and this one, and this one. You just stagger it. Don't just send one all the way. I don't think that would be good, because they definitely seem to want to caulk on you if you don't evenly tighten them. And then these stretch bolts that hold on the phaser and the sprocket, you read the manual, but you gotta tighten them a certain amount, then back it off, then tighten them again to a lighter amount, and then do 90 degrees. And that's pretty tight. I mean, you gotta get a breaker bar to do it, but you need to stretch that bolt. It's a yield bolt. These are the old ones right here. So they're pretty beefy, but you really got a reef on them. So the timing marks aren't lined up anymore, but I can promise you that they were when I put the chain on. I clearly could see and got everything lined up good. And then, on the back side here, you're able to line up the colored links on this side with the main keys on each of these sprockets. And so everything's lined up good, and I've turned it over once now by hand, and everything went pretty well. After I pulled, all the new tensioners came with pins. So once I was convinced everything was good, pulled the pins and let the tensioners all spring out. The chain doesn't ride perfect yet, because the tensioners need oil pressure. So, you'll see this fluctuate a little bit as you turn it over, but no binding. Everything seems pretty good. So I think I'm probably going to call it for tonight, and then tackle the cover tomorrow. Glue that timing cover on. Now that's a whole task in itself with the torquing sequence. I think what I'm going to do is number the cover with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever 20 something points that it is, and go from there. I still need to press this seal in. I couldn't find anything real good, so I picked up one of these, and we'll see if that fits. One of those fits. And that's about it. There's all the old stuff. Overall, there's a little bit of wear in these guides and the tensioners. You'd be silly not to change these while you're in here. They weren't awful, but gotta do it. Alright, I figured this was a good time for an update, since I've been struggling all morning, and I'm losing track of what I've done. So this morning I put the timing cover on. That is a pretty long process. You can see that I numbered the bolts. If you look at your service manual, it'll tell you what order to go in, and there's 6 or 7 steps and different torques. And you don't want to overdo it with the silicone, but you do have to be real careful with that, and have real clean surfaces. I mean, that's basic stuff. So got that done, and the next hard part was getting this pulley back on. You can't just tap it on there. You gotta press it back on there, and somewhere here I was lucky to find a metric M12 bolt that was long enough. Basically, the crank bolt doesn't reach, so you need a longer bolt, and got a bunch of spacers, and I was able to tighten this and slowly pull the pulley back in. They do make a tool for that, but I didn't want to go rent it. So there is a torque sequence. I got to figure out how to hold this while I torque it, but it is fully on at this point. I just, I'll torque it at some point. The next crappy part of this job was getting this power steering pump belt back on. Figured I know I can fit the power steering pump back up through when I picked the engine up, so I figured I'd put it on now while it was easier. As you can see, I broke a lot of zip ties trying the zip tie trick before I finally figured out to use a hose clamp. It's unbelievable how stretchy this belt, or how hard it is to get this belt on. So set up the hose clamp here really tight, put a piece of old belt in between so that it wouldn't cut into the new belt, and then you really have to reef on the crank and with a breaker bar and spin this around, and it'll pop the belt on. And I mean, that is super tight. So I was almost ready to give up, but that's a hose clamp. I think is the best way. I bought this stupid little tool because Rock Auto said that was going to do the trick. No way. It doesn't really fit in this setup. Alright, more updates. Things are moving pretty fast now. Putting the motor back in place was pretty easy, actually. Really just lifted it up and high enough until I could bolt these up, push it around a little bit, jockey it a little bit, but it was pretty easy to get these reattached and put my stand back under them, the dog bone mount to keep the engine from twisting, and then got my lift out of there. And then sequence of events, alternator and tensioner back on, and then compressor and serpentine belt. I was able to torque this nut using my chain wrench again, and that is just 100 foot-pounds. Then back it off, then I think it's about 30 foot-pounds, and then 90 degrees. And that actually was pretty hard to get that bolt to turn 90 degrees. It's pretty tight. And then just starting to go through and started on the right side, right front here. I've been working my way around, reattaching everything. Figured out a way to get this fan shroud in there a lot easier. If you take this off, it's just a couple of 10 millimeters. This thing will sort of slide in that way, much smoother. So I did that without issue, and started to reattach hoses, transmission cooler lines, electrical. A lot of the clips that hold this harness on got broken, so I have to zip tie things back. But just working my way around. In the process of torquing this valve cover now. Get all that attached and get those wires plugged in, and then I think I'll be starting to shift to the subframe. I can really do almost everything up here, get this all buttoned up, and then go underneath, but I can't button up this windshield wiper yet until I get the subframe under there, because I need to reattach that hydraulic line to the steering rack. I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but I'm just going to keep working my way around, getting everything hooked up. We'll go from there. Hopefully I didn't forget anything.